Thank you. So before I get started, I'd like you all to pretend that you're not human, but simply an observer, an equal organism, no more valuable than any other organism. And I know as humans this can be hard for us to do because we value ourselves quite highly, but in the global scale of time, we're fairly new to the scene, and sometimes I fear that our brains aren't evolving as fast as our problems are. So, could I get some reassurance that you've halted your humanity just for the next 12 minutes or so? All right, thank you. So, we need to take a look at agriculture and modern landscaping with completely fresh eyes. And to do that, we're going to need to go way back, long before human intervention, genetic engineering, and hybridization of plants. The landscapes that were around us, they were created and managed by a vast array of organisms. You see, plants were creating these really elegant packaging, seeds, and they were distributing themselves through wind and water, and then animals also aided in the process by consuming the vegetation and the fruits that they produced. And it was all this really elegant, symbiotic, chaotic, yet organized system. Now, humans entered the mix, and our initial approach to agriculture was much differently than we have now. At first, we didn't construct agriculture like row crops the way that we do now. Instead, we created it more like a forest, more emulating an ecosystem. And these food forests, humanity's first attempt at landscaping and agriculture, these were incredibly robust systems. So robust that some of them are still running today. So like this 2,000-year-old Moroccan food forest. The people who constructed this, they took note of how the ecosystems were constructed using lots of different varieties of plants and emulating a true ecosystem. This space supports more than 80 different farmers, requires no maintenance, and by the way, this is all going on in the middle of a desert. It's pretty incredible. Now, by the time I came around, this incredible relationship was reduced to this, which is just a mechanized, completely emotionless action, only control and exploitation behind it. You see, the way that we construct agriculture and landscapes, they don't really excite us. They don't really get into our minds. So, for example, do you remember what plants were used outside of the grocery store, or maybe what lined the sidewalk in front of the bank? Or how about those really sickly trees they planted in the new subdivision? Are those grabbing your attention? So boxwoods, for example, a really unengaging plant. These boxwoods are so incredibly unengaging that they actually bored Jack Nicholson's character to death in The Shining. It's true. It's oversimplified. It's overmanaged. And it's all just so human. So, and as we scale up these practices, so do we scale up our problems, requiring more chemistry to deal with the nutrients, more genetic alteration to combat the pests and disease, more mechanization to keep up with the ever-exceeding yields that our populations require, and overall, just a lot more micromanaging. But there's good news here, too. There is a solution. We can work with nature instead of against it. We can revisit that initial coevolutional relationship that we once had with plants. What we have to do, I'm going to give you just 3 guidelines to kind of assist us in this process, to aid in the natural organisms and processes that already exist, no matter where we're standing. So number 1, we should copy what works. I think emulating a forest is a great place to start. This is a really efficient use of space. We've got lots of different varieties of organisms. It's all self-managing. No one is managing a forest. So I use the same concept to implement in this landscape. I implemented more than 75 different edible plants, occupying multiple different niches, thus reducing all the maintenance. This one only requires a couple of visits a year to keep it all up and running. Number 2, delegate work. So soil aeration, fertilization, manual pollination, these are all extremely expensive and labor-intensive things to do. But when I'm designing an edible space, I'm designing it so that I can bring in an army of a workforce to help me out. For example, even though I'm designing an edible space, I'm still implementing some native plants and some flowers to bring in our pollinators. I'm using some natural mulches that break down over time and feed the plants. I'm also utilizing some aggressive ground covers to reduce all the weeds and make it much easier to maintain. And instead of tilling with tools, I bring in an army of worms, and they till the soil for me. They also manage it while I'm away. It's much easier. It's a much better approach. And number 3, meet your expectations. Now, the whole reason we install landscaping around us is to elevate our exterior spaces, to excite us. So why are we using all these boring plants that have little resemblance to natural beauty? Why don't we use plants that excite us, that excite our senses on multiple levels, that feed the inhabitants of the space, being us and also wildlife? Now, the goals of ornamental landscaping and agriculture, they are not mutually exclusive. For a very long time, we have been using plants that don't excite us, that don't really draw us into those spaces. I mean, just imagine, okay? If instead, on your walk to work in the morning, and, presuming some of you walk to work, but on your walk to work in the morning, instead of hustling around like this manicured row of boxwoods, if instead you could scarf down a few blackberries and observe a hummingbird in the distance. Now, this is not a romanticized vision of what humanity can achieve. This is a relic. And it's a relic of what we've lost. Now, another major problem with this whole free food system is also an invention of modern man, and that's the one of ownership. So as people, we're quite possessive. And if we're moral, we may even fear that, like, even in an edible space like this, that we might be stealing from someone else. It's funny because in public spaces, when we plant ornamental plants, it's rare that anyone notices or even cares. But when you use an edible plant, it can sometimes become immediately controversial. So, whose orange tree is this? Who gets to take all this eggplant home? Now, those questions never come up on a stroll through the woods when you walk up on some wild blackberries, so it's possible. It's possible to implement these plants in the spaces that we occupy the most. Now, these utilitopias, if you will, these spaces that are designed to support the inhabitants without ownership, that's important. How do we make all this food free? We just have to make this food beautiful. We already spend $76 billion on landscaping to design these spaces that we don't even notice most of the time. And I'm proud to say that we have at least one such utilitopia thriving in our city. We named it the Victory Garden in honor of my friend that helped me to conceptualize this beautiful space about 10 years ago. Vegetables are spilling out onto the sidewalk, fruit is ripening, and neighbors are using this space both as a park and as a grazing garden. This is a space that reminds us of the beauty in life. And that's really what this paradigm shift is all about. It's about reminding us of all the beautiful and intricate systems that exist outside of our human-focused world. Now, it's going to take some time, and it's going to take a shift in our paradigm. But I'd rather make strides to alter the social paradigm that we're in than just create an additional fad in vegetable gardening, a niche, like the topsy-turvy tomatoes. Those were great. I've been creating such spaces for 3 years now, and I'm here to attest that they work, all right? Instead of people who are bored with the formalities of ornamental landscaping, I see people that are excited to be in these spaces, and I like to watch the expressions on their faces as they pick from these edible food forests, an activity that most humans haven't partaken in for hundreds of years. We can create utilitopias, spaces that both humans and non-humans alike enjoy, spaces that encourage just a casual passerby to stop, observe, and ponder. Now, it's really up to us to write this next chapter. It's up to us to rethink our outside spaces and imagine all the possibilities that are out there. Thank you for your time.